Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Good morning. Our speaker today is Donald Rothberg, and I mentioned to him my computer would not let me into our website this morning, and so whatever statements I may make about him are from little tidbits that people have told me. But before we begin, let us go around as our own and introduce ourselves. And please mention if this is the first time or returning for a long time. My name is Bob.
My name is Larry.
Joe.
No Blue.
Greg.
Doug.
Carl.
George.
CJ.
Michael.
Farouk.
Bob.
Kay.
Paul.
Larry. Dean. David. Tom. Paul.
Bill.
Mark.
Ray.
Alan.
Christopher, first time.
John.
Cliff.
Chairman.
Ed. Peter.
Donald.
Welcome, Christopher. What pieces of information I remember about Donald is he's not an infrequent speaker here. He's involved with the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, associated with Spirit Rock.
Mm-hmm.
He has a book coming out, which I hope he will tell us some about, and often speaks about darkness. Not in a negative way.
Thank you. I've never had quite that introduction. So I'm pleased to be here again. I believe I've come at least once or twice most of the last 4 or 5 years. I did come at this time about a year ago, and I spoke of darkness, but I have 1 or 2 other themes in my repertoire. And I do have a book that I just finished about a week ago. Except for final copy editing and so forth, but it's probably come out in the late summer or early spring, and the title of the book will be The Engaged Spiritual Life, a Buddhist Approach to Transforming Ourselves and the World. And it's about the connection of individual spiritual practice and social change, really how we understand the core principles and practices, both in terms of our individual practice, but how we can then see the same principles at work in our relationships, organizations, communities, and the larger efforts for social change. So it'll come out with Beacon Press in probably early September, I think. So I'm pleased about that. And after finishing a big project, my consciousness, after quite a number of months and even actually several years of focus, it feels like it's sort of dissolving outward into the cosmos. And so if I lose focus, my apologies. But so I thought to call this talk today slowing down when speeding up. And I think that was distributed via email by is it Paul Albert, right? So some of you know that theme, and what I wanted to talk about was some about the particular time of year, which does have to do with darkness, but also has to do in this culture with a tremendous amount of speed for many of us. And then I wanted to give two sort of alternative ways to be with our times, or this time, which really is our times as well. One way to be with speed and darkness is to slow down, go deeper, find our balance, connect with our priorities, and to somewhat resist the speediness of the time and be more, in some ways, like the natural world. And the other way is to, particularly if we can't totally resist the speed, is to slow down internally with the speed and, as it were, slow down when speeding up. It's to develop more spaciousness and equanimity around the speed. And I think that points to really two basic qualities of our practice. One of which is to have a certain ability to be with what's most important, to be fresh, to connect with sort of what we might call the dark and mysterious nature of things. And the second has to do with cultivating spaciousness and equanimity no matter what's happening. And so, to me, the times really point to a possibility of deepening our sense of what these very basic qualities of practice that we cultivate when we sit and hopefully in our daily life. So, I've always reflected, or not always, but lately I've been reflecting about how there's something rather strange about the way our culture handles this time of year. That in many cultures, the time of greatest darkness, when nature is entering into a time of hibernation, is often a time of resting, of going more deeply. In many indigenous cultures, it's a time of ceremonies, as people know, of reflection, of inactivity. And for us, when nature is most slow, we are most fast. Even frenzied. I don't know if that is your experience or whether you've found sane ways to be with these times, but certainly the culture as a whole speeds up to, I guess this weekend may be the absolute frenzy of shopping, right? In the culture. I don't know, maybe there's a few more days during the week, but then with New Year's is also kind of a frenzy. And it's interesting. And in a similar way, when nature is most speedy and quick and things happening during the summer, we slow down and take vacations. And so, to me, this is an interesting way to reflect. And of course, we know that in many ways our culture is deeply out of sync with the natural world in ways that are extremely dangerous, that I imagine many of us are trying to help counteract. There's a way in which we can, I think, recognize that kind of speed. And I wanted to read something from a good friend, Diana Winston, who I believe has come here at least once or twice. Has she? Yeah, not for a while. And she wrote an article called Speed for this Buddhist Peace Fellowship journal called On Time, which was from a few years ago. And she reflected considerably about speed, and in the middle of it is this kind of prose poem that she wrote about the speed of the culture. I don't have time to write letters, read books, visit my friend, play with my little brother, kiss, touch, sigh, dance, relax, eat ice cream, make music, cook, pray, smell, meditate, take a walk. My God, make it all stop. I don't have time and it's running out and I'm running fast and furiously. I want it to stop. Ouch, it's painful. Why won't it stop? Can't you make it stop? God, what's wrong with this country? Have we all gone crazy? We're insane. We've lost touch. We've got to stop this endless running about. All I want to do is slow down, just crawl into bed and rock myself to sleep. Not this craziness, not this crazy running around. I am so tired. Please, somebody have help. Got to help make me stop. And there's, is that familiar? Is anyone, how many people here are a little faster than usual at this time of year? And how many are in a balanced, slow, or adequate perspective? So, okay, so maybe I'll do another talk then. Maybe, but to me, I know my larger extended family, we actually have an agreement not to give presents during the holiday time, which helps a lot, So to me, it's actually more a time of slowing down, with responsibilities not present. But I'm very aware of how our culture is so speedy, and probably, I imagine it influences many of us. There was a book that came out which crystallized a lot of this about 10 years ago called The Overworked American by Juliet Schor, who's an economist at Harvard. And she, by her analyses, suggested that Americans work about a month more per adult than we did 30 or 40 years ago. And that we work far more when compared to, let's say, the Europeans. It's known that we have about, I think the average is 12 days of vacation a year, and Europeans have more like about 30 or 40. They have 5 or 6 weeks of vacation, and we tend to overwork, and it seems as if what has actually happened was that when there was an increase of labor-saving technology, we could have stayed at the same standard of living and worked less and had more leisure and more time. And without any clear democratic decision-making about it, we seem to have chosen to another option, which was to increase consumption rather than keep it at the same. Increase consumption and work more. And yet it was never really clearly talked about. And so we've done this, and we're in this situation where people are working tremendous amounts, and it's hard at times really to connect with what's deeper, what's most important, and it's something that is a kind of frenzy that in many ways is spreading around the world as people are given the option of having greater consumption. And it's obviously very dangerous. If the whole world has our level of consumption, we're in a very dangerous place. It's a very serious issue. And just one anecdote that I heard from when I was in Thailand once, talking with Sulak Sivaraksha, who's a Thai Buddhist activist and been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize a few times. And he told the story of how in the 1950s there were American development experts sent to Thailand to help so-called develop the economy. And they talked to the government officials, and they said, there's a big problem in your country in terms of the development of the economy. Your people are too content. And with that level of contentment, the economy will never grow. So you have to teach them in some ways to be discontented with what they have. From one perspective, it's almost as if contentment in some way is the greatest wealth we can have, our happiness, our contentment. And in some way, they were being robbed of their greater wealth to increase a more superficial wealth. And it happened. Now they're much less content. Has anyone been to Bangkok? It's a very quickly changing city that has rampant development, and in many ways, rampant prostitution and really losing much of the essence of the culture in the interest of development. So I think we can reflect on that and see that as part of the basis for the speediness of this time. So given that there's this speed in our culture often or in our lives, what do we do about that? What are our responses? And I was thinking that there are really these two basic responses. One is to take this time as a time of slowing down, which is in a sense what we always do when we practice. But to take this time as a time for entering into the energy of the natural world, which in part is the energy of darkness. I love the way that this time can be an invitation to look more deeply at our lives. It's really the positive aspect of New Year's resolutions, whatever the way that gets made more superficial or contorted in various ways. So part of the invitation now is to look more deeply, to find ways in the coming weeks, particularly to enter into the rhythms of nature, the darkness of the time, in some ways the mystery of our lives. And for me, it's been a very important time. Probably 2/3 of the last 25 years, I've done something like a week or 10-day retreat over New Year's time, and it's been really, really important. There's something about going in when nature is most still, going into the darkness and the mystery that is very, very powerful. It's really to invite ourselves to say, what's really happening in my life? How can I take this time as a way to go into my own darkness, to go into my own mystery? And something that I believe we do every time we meditate, that this chance to go into the darkness at this time of year is sort of an intensification of something that we do every time we practice. It's really a letting go of the known, of what we think should be happening. And it's part of the discipline of meditation to enter into that mystery each time we sit. A lot of us, we may sit and we may say, well, I'd like to sit and I'd like to A, work out this or that problem, B, enter that nice relaxed state that I had yesterday or the day before. In other words, we don't really so much embrace the mystery. We don't so much embrace the darkness. We don't so much embrace a kind of not knowing, which is at the heart of meditation. And it permits us to go more deeply. There's a beautiful passage in one of my favorite books called The Faith to Doubt. Some of you may know, subtitled Glimpses of Buddhist Uncertainty by Stephen Batchelor, who's an English writer. He said, the mysterious lies at the heart of our lives, not at the periphery. Its presence is only felt to the extent that a meditative attitude still lives within us. Unlike a problem, a mystery can never be solved. A mystery can only be penetrated. A problem once solved ceases to be a problem, but the penetration of a mystery does not make it any less mysterious. The more intimate one is with mystery, the greater shines the aura of its secret. The more intimate one is with mystery, the greater shines the aura of its secret. And so, think of this time as an invitation to drop some of our preconceptions, to enter into a kind of not knowing, to question our assumptions or our views. Again, which is right at the heart of Buddhist practice. The Buddha often talked about the importance of looking at our attachments to views or assumptions, to ways that we think things are, and entering into something more deeply intuitive and seeing how the views can make harder that intuitive knowing. The Buddha talked about how we get sort of caught up in views, caught up in this, what he called a thicket of views. He said, we are caught in a thicket of views, the wilderness of views, the contortion of views, the vacillation of views, the fetter of views. Fettered by the fetter of views, we are not free from suffering. So there's something about how this reliance on assumptions and views is linked with our suffering, is linked with how we get caught, get into arguments, into disputes. And so we can see this time as an invitation to enter into not knowing, to being open to know what might be appropriate. And it's not really so much that we give up knowing, but that we know how not to know, if you know what I mean. There's let me see if I can remember. There's a very interesting statement, which I don't have written down here, but I'm having sort of remembering by memory, by let's see. I'm even forgetting the author, but it says something like, it's a 19th century British writer, and he said something like, one who can know can only do so because you know how not to know. So I think of this dark time as an invitation to come. It's really, in perfectly logical language, we would say, we let go of more superficial knowledge to come to unknowing so we can come to deeper knowledge. It's the same way that in the Zen story it's said that in the beginning mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. As I went deeper into Zen, mountains were no longer mountains and rivers were no longer rivers. But then when I had come to the depths of understanding, mountains were once against mountains and rivers were once against rivers. So that should make it completely clear what we're talking about. So there's something also about these times and going to the darkness, which is also about the sort of the regaining of light and going even into the darkness of our times to sometimes the despair, the difficulty. Probably like many of you, I was fairly, horrified and troubled by the execution that happened last Monday, right? I'm sure that was something very alive for many of us, so to speak. And there's a way in which we are also invited, in terms of entering into darkness or into unknowing, to enter into something that lets us come to something deeper that can help with whatever despair is there or whatever deep troubles there may be about the state of our world, which I think it's a very difficult state of things right now. I think we all know that in many, many ways. And I wanted to read something from Michael Lerner, who's the editor of Tikkun magazine, a Jewish rabbi, many of you know. And he writes something about the way that the holidays of the Western world, Christmas and Hanukkah, all are about going into the darkness but coming out with greater light. So I wanted to read, to me this is an inspiring passage. There is a beautiful spiritual message underlying Christmas that has universal appeal. The hope that gets reborn in moments of despair. The light that gets relit in the darkest moments of the year. It's beautifully symbolized by the story of a child born of a teenage homeless mother who had to give birth in a manger because no one would give her shelter. And escaping the cruelty of Roman imperial rule and its local surrogate Herod, who already knew that such a child would grow up to challenge the entire imperialist system. To celebrate that vulnerable child as a symbol of hope that eventually the weak would triumph over the rule of the arrogant and powerful is a spiritual celebration with strong analogies to the Jewish Hanukkah celebration, which also celebrates the victory of the weak over the powerful. Many other spiritual traditions around the world have similar celebrations at this time of year. So it's the light over the dark, but only by going into the darkness. And also the weak over the arrogant, powerful, imperial. So this time, we can use it in various ways. We can go more slowly. We can do periods of retreat. We can be closer to nature. We can reflect on what's important. We can take some very special time to go more deeply. You know, in Buddhist language, we would say we might reflect on our refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, in the possibility of awakening, symbolized by the Buddha, or the the core teachings about freedom and about suffering, what causes suffering, what leads to freedom, the Dharma, and then the Sangha, the community of practitioners who help us, who are present to us in our moments of need as well as our moments of celebration. And so consider this time as an invitation to slow down, to go more deeply, to go into the dark, to go into the unknowing. And yet, things are sometimes speedy. And the second option is to find a different way to be with the speed when it's present. In a way, it's to say that kind of slowing down externally can be matched by a similar slowing down internally, basically no matter what's happening. And to me, this is a pointing towards the teachings about equanimity and spaciousness and being able to be present with whatever's happening, with that same quality of depth, of awareness. And it's harder when things are speeding up, but I imagine that we all could think of moments that we've learned how to be mindful, present, more compassionate during times of speeding up. For me, there were a few times when something really clicked about doing this. One was a time when I think I had done about a month or two on retreat, and I was at on the East Coast at the Insight Meditation Society, and I volunteered to help with the kitchen for a few days. Basically, the retreat was still going on. I was helping with cooking for 120 people. And I came from being slow, meditating, being quiet, and having basically to run around half crazed to get the meal ready. How many people have worked in a retreat kitchen? So some of you know this. So the meal I particularly remember was when we were making tacos. And we were making tacos for 120 people, which involved a lot of complicated things, and it was really, I was going very, very fast, and yet there was something of that quality of presence and equanimity, and still having an inner peace and freedom, even though things were very fast. And I think that's really part of the secret to our lives, is to learn how to do that. And we can ask ourselves, what would help me to be more mindful, open about when things are going very quickly, or sometimes when things are not going quite like I want. And so we can really point towards, okay, what would help? Well, for me, a lot of what would help would be to be careful about the stories that I'm telling about how things should be slower. About this is too fast, this is really this crazed culture, and that can be an excuse for me to contribute my degree of reactivity. It really points to the way that the aim of meditation is not to go slowly. It's not to look a certain way. It's not to have a certain external appearance. It's not, I think we know, it's not to wear certain clothes. It's not to look, have a certain appearance. But rather, it's that quality of balance and equanimity and mindfulness and awareness that we can bring to every moment. And moments when things are not our preferred speed or not our preferred way of happening are wonderful ways to test that quality, right? To really say, okay, can I bring, even to this situation, can I bring more balance, more awareness, more compassion? And so we can take these moments as invitations to practice, to slow down, to look at if we're telling ourselves a story that makes it harder to be present. Like, this shouldn't be this way. These people are too speedy, or whatever it might be. Or it might be that we find ourselves not liking certain kinds of speed, or not liking certain kinds of difficult situations. And so here the invitation again is to be present, to be equanimous. The nature of equanimity, as the Buddha teaches it, has to do with balance in every situation. Balance and evenness and a certain unshakability no matter what's happening. And to me, these speedy situations or these difficult situations are invitations to grow more deeply in equanimity. Nyanaponika Thera, a German-born monk, said this about equanimity. Equanimity is a perfect, unshakable balance of mind rooted in insight. So there's a quality of balance that we're asked for. This is from the Buddha about this whole question of speed, balance, equanimity. For one who clings, motion exists. But for one who clings not, there is no motion. Where no motion is, there is stillness. Where stillness is, there is no craving. Where no craving is, there is neither coming nor going. Where no coming nor going is, there is neither arising nor passing away. Where neither arising nor passing away is, there is neither this world nor a world beyond, nor a state between. This is the end of suffering. So it's that challenge. Can we take the normal, speedy time as an invitation to explore that state where there's no motion? And he's referring to sort of no motion internally, like the what the eye of the hurricane, or the stillness at the center of the storm. It's an invitation to explore that. It's also there's a beautiful Jewish image that some of you may know of the 36 just persons. They're called the Lamed Vav, which is, I think, Hebrew for 36. And the Lamed Vav are these 36 beings, many of whom are completely unknown, who keep the world in balance. Without even one of them, the world would fall into utter despair and imbalance. And so it's the legend that these 36 beings are like the center of the world, this center of equanimity, and they keep things going. And it might be your grandmother. Many of them don't even know that they're the Lamed Vav. In fact, it's usually better that way. So that's you can make what you want of that, but it's kind of a legend that points to this quality of stillness. And so I wanted to end with a Zen story, which is about the possibility of having a stillness even when very speedy or busy, of having an equanimity no matter what's happening. And this is from a book of Chinese koans called the Book of Serenity. A Zen teacher was sweeping the grounds of the temple, and apparently he was moving very quickly. Another teacher came up to him and said, "Too busy." The first teacher responded, "You should know that there is one who is not busy." So you know what that means? No. There is one who is not busy. Something maybe inside that's not busy. Kind of like I was saying. Okay. So I'll start again, because these Zen stories kind of come quickly. So you gotta, I don't know, how many people are Zen students here? Okay, so some of you may have even heard this and may have deep analyses that we can share later. So a Zen teacher is sweeping the grounds of the temple. He's approached by another teacher who looks at him and says, "Too busy." The first teacher responds, "You should know that there's one who is not busy." The second teacher then answers, "If so, then there's a second moon." At which point, the teacher who's been sweeping holds up his broom and says, "Which moon is this?" That's the end of the story. So, to me that points to what does it point to? To me it points to the second possibility, that the first possibility is that in a time of busyness and things being kind of frenzied, we can take a refuge and actually say, "No, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to look more deeply. I'm going to take this time to be in touch with what's most important, what's most deep in my own life." And this is something that we can do at this time. We can do it all the year round, of course. We can, if we get busy, we can say, "No, it's important to really touch deeply," and to do that regularly. to do it every day, maybe to do it every week. For me personally, most of the last 25 years, I've taken one day as a Sabbath practice, where I just stop all the emails, the telephone. 25 years ago, there weren't emails, but just stop, and do that. So we can do it every day. We can do it once a week. We can do it periodically. And that's this first strategy, as it were, this first way of responding to busyness, is to say, for me, it's really important to have this kind of refuge, to have chances to go more deeply periodically. But then secondly, we can also say, if that was the only way I could deal with this, then what happens when things aren't like I want? What happens when things are too speedy? Do I sit there saying, things are too speedy, I need to slow down, this is bad, and get really stuck, right? So we also have to know how to slow down, as it were, when speeding up. How to have a way of having these same qualities be there when things aren't as we wish, when they're too fast, so to speak, too busy, as the Zen master said, and respond in some way to cultivate that equanimity that can be with the busy, with the unwanted, with the difficult, and have that same quality that could be there as when we have what we want, we can be silent, quiet, have things arranged like we want. And I think it's that combination and having those two possibilities that can make our practice come more alive. We have those two things in our repertoire, and you may notice that having things the way we want and having things not the way we want, it covers all possibilities. So then we're set up to develop in whatever happens. Thank you.
Are you available for questions?
Oh yeah.
Discussion?
That's my favorite part. Please.
I think there's a third possibility.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
I think that the part of the Buddhist teaching, the important part that we're doing here, this slowing down, this attending, is one part of his. He called his teaching the Dharma Vinaya.
Yeah.
And the Dharma is this teaching of emptiness and slowing down and quiet. But the Vinaya is about social, social engagement, making a society that works.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in this retreat center where you were working so hard in the kitchens while everyone else is, this is a classic labor violation. And it's very prominent. It happens a lot in these sorts of centers.
Mm-hmm.
They take advantage of the students who are overworked. Why should they be so frantic in a place that's trying to make a better world?
Mm-hmm.
So they need more help in there, or they need better tools, or they need some mix masters or something to make their life a little keep up with the job that they have to do. Just one last thing. I lived in Japan, and they have such a wonderful self-containment and respect for space of others that it has gotten to this ridiculous extreme where when they're on the subway, they are just packed into where it's absolutely unhealthy, uncomfortable for hours on end. But there's no, they need a social force that says enough too. The society can't sustain that much out of balance.
Yeah. So if I can frame or point to what I hear you saying, it's that it's really to say that part of a response to speed is to if it comes out of let's say an imbalanced social situation, is to transform the social situation, right? And maybe that can come. Maybe that's also that can come out of the slowing down. We can that could come and say, oh, from my experience with this is not healthy. We need to change it. Yeah. So it's not to have it be, oh, we just have to sort of cope with the way things are, but right, to change the conditions. Yeah. So that's the engaged perspective. Thank you. Please.
Oh,
Yeah.
talking about this time of year, obviously the holidays with the gift giving and all the craziness, that partially contributes to the speed this time of the year. One thing I think I've realized that's a good thing is now that in the popular media and in common conversation, we talk about the fact that, oh, it's so crazy, oh, Christmas is so commercialized, there's all this rush, everyone's stressed out, and because we can now all say that openly as compared to, I don't know if it was that way 25 years ago when it was just expected. Here's Christmas coming, you're going to get gifts for your family and your friends and blah, blah, blah. And that's the way it was. And so you had to do it now. At least we can all agree that it isn't necessarily a healthy thing. That's kind of neat.
So at least recognition of the craziness is in advance.
I don't know if it was that way 25 years ago.
Was it that way 25 years ago?
Yes. Was it?
Yes.
I swear it was. Could you have said 23 years ago, oh my God, I'm so stressed out, I have all these gifts.
Oh, yeah, the holidays from hell.
That everyone's
That's
talking
for
about.
years. That's the holidays. You just jack everything up and do it all.
Every year this theme is too commercial, it's too busy, the message is always the same. That seems right.
It's part of popular culture for me too.
Yeah.
But I think you could go back to a time when it was just a
Yeah, 200 years ago.
that could go back pretty far.
Well, there probably is some clear social analysis which analyzes these markers whereby the holidays got turned into something more commercial, right? I'm sure that, analyzing. I mean, a lot of these holidays were started. Some of the other holidays were started by Hallmark or something. What was it?
Valentine's.
What? Valentine's Day. Yeah, Valentine's Day.
Mother's
Yeah.
Day.
Please.
In reaction to you said too muchness this year, I just, I got my presents in the mail way in advance. I had days off. I was going to have a spacious holiday. I've only done music. I've avoided stores. This music has been great. Yesterday I got a message from my mother, and she's anguished that I'm not going to be at Christmas. Where it just was for Thanksgiving. So this morning I wake up and say, fuck it, I'll go. So I've just made a reservation at an extortionate rate for 2 days in D.C. that will just feed you. And I feel very peaceful. Like, this is the holidays. This is what I recommend.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've surrendered my attachment to a stillness around the holidays, and I'm just going to do it all. And I feel better.
But it sounds like you have an inner stillness about giving up stillness.
Yes.
So to speak. Yeah.
That's right.
Which is that second option I was pointing to. So, please.
Well, this is maybe a little stray, but the whole idiocy about Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, that's been going on. I heard somebody comment on that, saying, Christmas has been sacrosanct and now it's being attacked. It's like this whole Merry Christmas thing where you go out and buy, and it dates back to like the 1920s or something. So this is not an age-old, timeless tradition since the birth of Christ. It's very much from the 20th century on.
Yeah.
So I just throw that tidbit out of that.
And it was a children's holiday. We bought things for kids, not for everybody.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I'm struggling with some of these issues now because I don't want to buy into the frenzy. And I have, in the past, sort of done what you've done with your family and sort of had an agreement, hey, let's not get into this and everybody buy and just because it's the holidays. But, I'm also in my practice trying to generate generosity, and I got a haircut on Tuesday, and one part of me is saying, hey, I'm not going to buy into this, and, XYZ have to give, $20 to the paper guy and $50 to this guy just because it's now, and on the counter were various bottles of wine and gifts to the barber, and so I wanted to just stay with where I was and just gave him my regular tip and said happy holidays. But, I left thinking, geez, am I being stingy? Can you talk about how to deal with that kind of conflict?
Let's see. I was going to have a flip first response, which is arrange your haircuts at a different time. But that's
too late for that.
I think conflicts can be good for our deepening. And so there's something, I like the idea of just sitting with the conflict. And I think the spirit of our practice is not so much to figure things out or to have everything work, but it's to take those kind of conflicts as invitations to look more deeply. Because I think the conflict itself is a real conflict. It points towards, one way to say it would be, it points towards the way that in our culture, this is both a time of frenzy and a time of generosity. It's that giving gifts does bring out that generosity and the warmth, and there's something beautiful about giving gifts to others. But it's a tension, because it's also driven by by greed, maybe, kind of about what the opposite of generosity is. And so, to me, that's a beautiful conflict, and so the question is, how can we respond to that conflict? And can I sit with that conflict and see if there's a way that I can both not give in to the greed, but also keep the generosity going? And it may be to say that this is a socially sanctioned time of both greed and generosity, but I'm going to focus on the generosity within certain where I keep my own balance or something. So there's a beautiful way. I don't know if anyone knows the work of Johan Galtung, who's one of the great peacemakers of our time, who's Norwegian. And
the last name is Galtung?
Galtung, Galtung. He comes through the Bay Area about once a year, and if you ever hear his name, go see him, because he's in his 70s now, and was probably when he was 30 years old, he was the founder of peace studies that have gone on in many universities. And he's also been a practitioner in places of conflict. There's some amazing stories I could tell, where there's one time when he single-handedly resolved a conflict between Ecuador and Bolivia, just by himself. That had resulted in 5 wars over 50 years. And the heart of his peacemaking work is basically listening, dialogue, and seeing the way that conflicts can be understood as involving both legitimate needs and illegitimate needs. And the role of the peacemaker is to listen carefully for what the legitimate needs are that are in conflict, and to then sit with it in a way and use the imagination to come up with a very creative response that almost that goes to a new level and creates what we might call a both-end solution. So it's like to listen, okay, what's legitimate here? Well, generosity is legitimate. Is there something else which is legitimate? And can I come up with a solution which, and this has to come out of deep creativity. So for example, I'll just mention, to give an example, the conflict that he resolved between Ecuador and Bolivia was about land that lies between those two countries in the Andes. And it was claimed by both countries. Between 1941 and 1995, they had, I believe, 4 or 5 wars. Quite a few thousand people killed, fighting about this land. And so at a certain point, there were some young military officers, I believe, in Ecuador, who were just disgusted by the fact that so many people had been killed. And the land was in the Andes. There wasn't anyone who lived there. There actually weren't any resources there either. It was kind of symbolic. And so he went there. They invited him down there because someone had heard of him. And he went down there and sat with them and said, is there a way that we could find this creative solution to this problem? And you might think of, how would you solve this problem? How would you have, as it were, the legitimate needs are to, in most conflicts you have typically the powerful get their way, and legitimate needs are not met. It's like typically there's a conflict, and whoever has more power gets his or her way. And so in this situation, he talking with people, the idea came up, let's have a jointly administered natural park in the land between the countries. They all agreed, and there have been no more wars and no more conflict. And he gave them a bill for $43 for the cost of he happened to be, I think, in Colombia at the time, for the bus ride from Colombia to Bolivia and one night's hotel. $43. But it can give you a sense of there has to for 50 years they could not come up with a creative solution because they were stuck. This gets back to this sense of not knowing and getting stuck in your views. They were stuck in their views that resulted in wars and conflict. So just to sit with a conflict and listen for a creative response, or to go into your situations at work, and can you see a conflict maybe that you have with someone else or that is there as these, can you see the legitimate points of each side, and can there be some imaginative way to work with it? And a lot of it is from this practice of just sitting and listening. And so rather than answer it, I would say just to give yourself to the sitting and listen and sort of appreciate the mystery of working with a conundrum or a conflict. It's a beautiful practice. Not easy. Thank you.
There was a question or comment.
Yeah.
Oh, it was just a thought that I had during this time, and I don't know if it applies or not, but I look at trees a lot. I like trees.
Yeah.
And it's said that the greatest activity right now in trees is in the roots. And so there is a lot. You look at the trees, and many of them, the leaves are falling and everything, but the greatest activity is really going on underground. And it's just an image that I reflect on a lot this time of year, and it's helpful for me.
That's beautiful, yeah. So it's very much in the spirit of what I was saying. Can we be like trees? And maybe outwardly more still, but going inward and beneath the surface, so to speak. It's beautiful. Yeah. That's great, yeah, because the roots are what help you for the rest of the year, right? That's what lets the trees be more and more stable as they get older. Yeah.
We have time for maybe one more comment or question.
Yeah, please.
This idea of being busy and how to go with the busyness, because sometimes just dropping out of life isn't an option.
Yeah.
I heard a Zen teacher, Darlene Cohen, talk about this, and she wrote a book called The One Who's Not Busy.
Is that right?
Yeah. And one of the things
that must be from that story.
Yeah. And she, one of the things that she suggested I've been using that I thought is very helpful is part of the stress that comes from modern life is you have you're juggling multiple priorities, and you have to go from one thing to another very quickly. And where I notice I get stuck, and she was making this point, is my mind doesn't like having to skip around a lot.
Yeah.
In fact, it resists sometimes. It's like I'm focused on writing this thing, and then I get an instant message, or the phone goes off, or the UPS man is downstairs, and part of the stress comes from resisting what is, the instant message, the UPS man, or whatever. And what she just really recommended is, as much as you can, to widen and narrow your focus as quickly as possible without too much attachment. So you go from being very focused on this to noticing what is in the world, but a broader perspective. I found that's really worked really well.
That's great. And it would also be to be really attentive to the story that we're telling ourselves. It has to be this way, or it should be this way, or UPS people should not come at this time. Something like that.
And the other thing too, I think, just on one of my insights is the physical body is a great way of grounding. It isn't nature to go, you know. And like I noticed that when I'm going to a Christmas party or rushing around, and I'm listening to NPR and I'm chopping in my head and all this stuff, that I have the opportunity to feel the steering wheel, turn off the radio, and to feel my feet while I'm sitting at the dinner party. It's going a little too late. I think it's nature with us.
That's great. That's great. So to ground in the body, and both in the sense of taking that as a place to be, but I think also to notice if there's tension in the body also.
That's right.
You know, to take the body as a wake-up call. Okay, I'm a little out of balance because my body is a little contorted, or there's some tension I can feel. And looking to where the mind and the heart are, and to seeing if there are any adjustments. So I think, but this is where we need. It's so wonderful to talk together about this, because we, you know, on our own we're kind of, I don't know. I'll speak for myself, but on my own I'm kind of dumb. And there's so much more intelligence, because, you know, someone can just say one thing, I just get reminded, oh, yes, make that adjustment. But so you know, but by myself, I'll just stay in some very unwise course of action for a greater length of time. So there's something that's great by the fact that we can remind ourselves, and hopefully we've remembered, and will remember some of what we explored today in the next week or two. Yeah, thank you.
We have a host today.
I'm Carl, your host. We have some sugary bakery morsels out there. We have some napkins to use. Please keep your crumbs to a minimum so we don't have the muses running around after them. And wash out your teacup when you're done. The teapot is actually over by the sink area because we couldn't get the plug to work over in its traditional spot. So I moved the jar of green tea and our English breakfast over by the teapot. And I understand there are some new people here. You're welcome to sign up on our guest list or register with us. And we have a donable that will circulate our recommendation for donations between $5 and $8, whatever you can, if you can. And that's all.
I have just one or two announcements. I brought some material, some schedules from Spirit Rock, and I also brought some of the Inquiring Mind, which probably many of you subscribe to, but it has an issue on Earth Dharma. And I don't have enough for everyone, but anyone who wants one can come up and get one. This is supported by donations, so you could just take one and do as you wish. And the other thing is, if anyone would want to be on an email list, just where I would talk about things that are happening or teaching that's happening, I'll leave this right up here, and you can come up and sign up if you wish to. Thanks.
Other announcements?
Just a brief one. Don Weaver, one of our elder members of DBS, long-standing, is kind of under the weather right now. He just had a knee operation too. So he passed on to me that he appreciated if people would just maybe, if they feel like it, check in and see how he's doing. And I have his phone number, and I can give it to anybody out there who wants it.
I'm hosting a potluck on December 25th, next Sunday, in the afternoon, so 2 to 7. We've got some flyers I'll put out. I'm Bob Siddle-Khan. I live at Waller and Fillmore, so it's quite convenient. And I think there'll be a South Asian theme. So talk to me about Indian food or Indian clothes or whatever you need.
Yeah, I talked with Raja last night, and Roger Corliss is planning to speak next Sunday on a similar theme about, you know, the light and the darkness. And he's doing well in his second round of chemotherapy. And he's already planning to be a chaplain for kids with cancer when he's recovered. So it's it's probably going to be quite a rewarding talk next Sunday. He's really bringing to bear his broad spiritual training to these health crises, and he is a treasure in our midst. And that's my regret that I won't be here, but anyway, so he's talking next Sunday. So looking forward to it.
Please say hello for me.
I shall.
Yeah, we're collecting data for a GBF directory that we hope will be out in spring in hard copy. And Todd Pope has our database, and he has a directory out there of what he has, and you can circle your name if you want to be in the directory and add any information that's not on there. I noticed the snail addresses aren't on there, for example. I didn't. No, I don't think so. It should be. So I'll talk to you after. Maybe we need a new printout. But also, if you are self-employed and offer a service, you can state that in the directory. This is not meant to be classified ads, but if you're an electrician, if you're a computer expert, massage therapist, something like that, you can put it in there with maybe a word or two qualifying what you do. So that hard copy will be out there. Look for that near the sign-up sheet. There's something else I wanted to say, but being 61 isn't easy.
Okay, you said it.
Steering committee meeting, Paul, I call it.
Steering committee meeting, yeah. The steering committee meeting, thank you. January 8th is a steering committee meeting, and there's people on the steering committee. Everyone on the steering committee has been on there 4 to 8 years, I would say. That's just a guess.
To 15 years.
To 15 years. So there's a lot of people who want to lead the steering committee, and so you're invited to consider going. As it's currently structured, we only meet 4 times a year for 1 hour following this meeting. And there are various email exchanges during the year. So it isn't labor intensive. But we need a steering committee. There's business to keep this operation running. So give it your serious consideration, especially those of you who've been around for a year or more and would like to do service.
Yes, a reminder that our talks are available on the internet at the GBF website, gaybuddhist.org.
Paul, I was just going to comment that when you have those memory lapses that come and go, rather than calling them senior moments, since I'm 60, which sounds a little too old for me, I call them age-appropriate dementia.
Someone else mentioned they had trouble getting to the website. I as well. Anyone else? There may be.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll.
We'll take a look at that. I'll talk to Joe about that. But I access it regularly.
Okay. I have
I think the thing was down this morning.
It's possible the server's down.
I looked at it today and I had no problem.
Depends on when.
Do I have a volunteer to walk around with the donut bowl? Do not be shy. We are all welcome to join us into a fall. Thank you.
Do you have one other announcement? We are doing a fundraising letter today, and we need volunteers to stuff the envelopes.
We will all gather at the table. That sounds like a different tradition. Let's all stand, join a circle. I wonder down if you can.
So being present to our bodies, to the fact of being alive. And feeling our good hearts moving out into the world, radiating out, filling the space here. Offering warmth and kindness and support to those here, and going beyond into the world, beyond these walls. Offering warmth and kindness and understanding for those who may be in difficult times right now, close by or far away. Remembering that spirit of connection and generosity. And offering the fruits of our meeting, our time together, outward into the world for the benefit, the awakening, the freedom, the healing of all beings. May it be so.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.